I want to start today with an image. It's honestly a little disturbing.
Yeah.
It's from a behavioral conditioning study I came across in our source material. It involves a dog, a steak, and a bowl of food. And I think it might be the single most accurate diagnostic for why leadership, and especially empowerment, so often fails.
Oh, I know exactly the study you're talking about. It's visceral. It's unpleasant to think about for sure.
It is.
But you're right. It explains so much about human psychology, especially in the workplace.
So let's just set the scene for you. A researcher takes a dog and ties it to a stake with a leash. Pretty standard stuff. Then they place a bowl of really good food just outside its reach.
Just far enough away.
Exactly. So naturally the dog lunges for it. But the leash isn't long enough. The collar chokes the dog. It feels pain. Failure. It tries again. Same thing. Choke. Pain. And this goes on for 4 weeks.
4 weeks of being conditioned to believe that effort equals pain.
Right. And eventually the dog just stops trying. It lies down by the stake. It's been completely conditioned to accept its limitation.
That's the setup, and, that's standard Pavlovian conditioning. But the twist, and this is the part that I think keeps leaders up at night, is what happens in week 5.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
In week 5, the researchers take the leash off. The dog is completely unbound. They even move the food closer, well within reach. The physical constraint is gone. The resource is available.
But the dog doesn't move.
It doesn't move. It stays right there by the stake.
Yeah.
The report says the dog would actually starve to death, sitting next to perfectly accessible food, because it was mentally incapable of believing it was free.
They had to physically pick the dog up and carry it to the food bowl to break the spell, to break the conditioning. And that image, starving while sitting next to the solution, that is exactly what we are here to unpack today.
We are diving deep into The Burden of Freedom by Myles Munroe. Now, full disclosure for our listeners. Munroe writes from a theological perspective. He uses a lot of biblical metaphors, national history. But what we're doing today is stripping that down to the absolute studs of organizational psychology and leadership strategy. Because that dog on the leash dynamic, I see that in Fortune 500 companies every single week.
Oh, absolutely. We usually see it in what we call the promotion trap, right? You take a high performer, someone who's been, leashed by micromanagement or a very strict oversight their whole career, and you promote them.
And you say, congratulations, here are the keys to the department. You have autonomy. You're free. Go for it.
And instead of flourishing, they freeze.
They just stop. They stop making decisions. They stop executing.
They starve by the stake. They've been delivered from supervision, but they are not mentally free to lead. And that is the central tension of this whole deep dive. We assume freedom is a gift. We assume everyone wants it.
Right.
But the argument here is that freedom is actually a crushing burden that most people are simply not conditioned to carry.
And that's our mission for today. We're going to look at why freedom so often fails, why granting autonomy can lead directly to chaos, and how to actually condition yourself and your team to handle the true weight of liberty.
And we have to be really precise here. We're not talking about freedom in like a big political sense or the I can't wait for the weekend sense.
No, this is executive freedom, the ability to operate without a safety net.
So I think the best place to start is with the definitions, because Munroe draws this incredibly sharp line in the sand between two concepts that we usually just treat as synonyms, deliverance and freedom.
This distinction is crucial. I mean, if you miss this, you miss the entire framework.
You do. So deliverance in this context is an event. It's the moment of removal, the removal of the restrictor.
In the dog experiment, taking the leash off, that's deliverance.
Exactly. It's physically getting out of the cage. It's quitting the toxic job. It's leaving the bad partnership. It's that moment the external pressure is released.
It happens in an instant.
Right. Deliverance is a physical separation from an oppressor. But freedom is something else entirely. It's a mental state.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset. Freedom is not getting out of the cage. It is getting the cage out of you.
That's such a great line, getting the cage out of you.
It's everything. It's the internal reconditioning. Deliverance can take a day. Freedom can take 40 years. This is exactly why you see companies spin off a division, they grant them deliverance, and that division just completely collapses within a year.
Because they had the autonomy, they had the budget.
But they didn't have the mindset. They were still thinking like they were inside the big machine.
The source material does this really interesting etymological breakdown of the word freedom. It splits it into two parts, free dominion.
Yes, and I think this is where we really have to shift our thinking as leaders. Usually when we hear freedom, we think absence of rules. I can do whatever I want.
The classic libertarian idea, no constraints.
But Munroe's argument is that freedominion means the authorized power to dominate a specific domain.
Okay, but dominate is a loaded word, isn't it? It sounds aggressive.
It does, but we have to be careful. In a leadership context, it's not about dominating people. That's just oppression.
Right.
It's about dominating an environment. Dominate your schedule. Dominate your resources. Dominate your own gifts and potential. It implies mastery, not just a lack of restraint.
So if we were to create a tight working definition for this deep dive, it would be something like, freedom is the liberty to dominate a specific domain through self-imposed management.
Self-imposed. That's the key. That's the absolute kicker. If you need someone else to impose discipline on you, you are not free. You are just a loose dog waiting for a new leash.
And this explains so much. It explains why we see chaos when we just empower teams without any prep work. The source material actually outlines 3 specific ways this goes wrong. These are what he calls the 3 repeated missteps of freedom.
A diagnostic checklist.
Exactly. It's a checklist for why a new leader or a newly autonomous team might be failing. And I want to walk through these.
Let's do it. Where do we start?
The first one is what he calls the tin tub mentality. This comes from a personal anecdote in the book, that is. It's funny, but it's also kind of tragic.
This is the story about his family moving to the new house, right?
Yeah. So Munroe describes growing up in a very small shack. 4 rooms, 11 kids.
Wow.
No running water inside. They had a pump in the yard. And every morning, the routine was the same.
Yeah.
You pump the water, you carry this heavy bucket inside, and you pour it into a small tin tub.
A tiny little tub.
Right. And because the tub was so small, you couldn't sit down. You had to stand up in the tin tub to wash yourself.
So that was the ritual. The constraint of the environment, the tin tub, dictated the behavior. Pump, pour, stand, scrub. Every day.
Exactly. But then, as the family's situation improved, they built a new house, modern plumbing, shiny porcelain bathtub. The environment has completely changed. They've been delivered from the shack.
Okay.
But, and here's the neuroplasticity problem. He says that for the first few months in the new house, the kids would fill the beautiful porcelain tub, and then they would stand up in it to wash.
That is the tin tub mentality, in a nutshell. The hardware changed. They got the porcelain tub. But the software in their brains hadn't updated.
They were treating a luxury asset like a poverty bucket.
Position does not guarantee disposition. That's the line from the book that it hits hard.
It's a massive issue in corporate change management. We see this constantly with digital transformation projects. A company spends millions on a new CRM, a new collaboration tool. It's essentially a porcelain tub.
And what happens? The team uses the powerful new tool to replicate their old, inefficient workflows. They stand up in the porcelain tub.
They send emails back and forth inside the project management software.
Exactly. Or they use the fancy new CRM as a glorified Rolodex. They don't know how to lean back and soak. They don't know how to leverage the new asset because their neural pathways are still wired for the shack.
So the big takeaway here is that just because something is new, that doesn't guarantee change. You can give a team a bigger budget, but if they have a scarcity mindset, a tin tub mindset, they won't use that capital to grow.
No, they'll just hoard it, or maybe spend it poorly on things that feel safe. If you give a poverty mentality $1 million, they don't become wealthy. They just become a poor person with a lot of cash to mishandle. The failure isn't in the resource, it's in the mental conditioning.
Which brings us to the second misstep, and I want to push back on this one a little bit, or at least clarify it, because the language is intense. It's called pharaoh dependency.
I know where you're going with this. The source material uses the metaphor of slavery in Egypt very heavy.
It does. And in a modern workplace, calling an employee a slave or a manager pharaoh feels heavy-handed. It could even be offensive.
It is heavy, I agree. But let's try to look at the mechanic behind the metaphor, not just the word itself.
Okay.
In any system of oppression, whether that's, historical slavery or just toxic extreme micromanagement, the oppressor provides everything. They provide the food, the housing, the schedule, the task list.
And the motivation is entirely external. It's the whip. Or in the modern office, it's the threat of being fired. It's the angry email from the boss at 10 p.m.
Exactly. It's all external drive. Now, here is a controversial point that Munroe makes. Oppression conditions people to be unproductive.
Wait, say that again? Usually we think the exact opposite. We think lazy people are the ones who need micromanagement to be productive.
That's the manager's excuse for their own bad habits. But think about the psychology. If you've been conditioned for years to only move when a pharaoh tells you to move, you literally lose the muscle of self-starting.
Your initiative atrophies.
Completely. So the moment the pharaoh is removed, the moment you get that freedom, that promotion, that autonomy, productivity just collapses.
Not because the person is inherently lazy, but because they've lost the internal mechanism to generate their own momentum.
It's the crash of motivation. When you remove the whip, if there is no internal motor to replace it, the vehicle just stops dead. We see this all the time with employees who beg for remote work. Just let me work from home, I'll be so much more productive.
You hear it constantly.
You say, yes, deliverance happens, and then crickets. Their output drops to zero.
Because they are suffering from pharaoh dependency. They actually needed the external pressure of the office, of the manager walking by, to function. They don't have an internal law.
And that leads directly to the third misstep, which I think is probably the most common one in Western culture today. He calls it the retirement fallacy.
This is the idea that freedom equals relaxation.
Yes, we are sold this constantly. The hammock on the beach, the perpetual vacation. Financial freedom almost always means I don't have to work anymore.
But the source material just takes a sledgehammer to this entire idea. It argues that true freedom imposes more laws, more work, and more discipline than slavery ever did.
I mean, it's a terrible sales pitch for freedom, honestly.
It is.
But it's the reality check we all need. Just compare the employee to the owner. The employee, the person under supervision, works 9 to 5. When the clock strikes 5, they are done. They don't worry about payroll. They don't worry about the big lawsuit. They don't worry about the market shifting overnight.
They go home. And in a way, that is a form of freedom. Freedom from responsibility.
Exactly. But the owner, the founder.
The owner works until the job is done. Full stop.
Yeah.
If a pipe bursts at the office at 3 in the morning, the employee is asleep. The free leader, the general manager, or the founder is the one wading through the water.
So the great paradox is this. The slave has a limited workday. The free person works all the time.
Precisely. Freedom is the burden of total ownership. It means you are the alpha and the omega of your domain. There is no one else to pass the buck to. There is no pharaoh to blame anymore. And that is why freedom is so heavy.
And if a team member thinks autonomy means less accountability, they are on a collision course with disaster.
Okay, so we have the diagnostic, we've got the tin tub old habits in new places, we have pharaoh dependency waiting to be told what to do, and the retirement fallacy thinking freedom means doing less. If that's the problem set, what's the solution?
The source lays out a really practical framework for this. We can call it the freedom stewardship stack. It's a way to move from what he calls wilderness thinking, that chaotic, messy middle ground, to Canaan thinking, which represents stability and real ownership.
Let's break this stack down. Level 1, you're saying, is the mental shift.
This is the absolute foundation. It's the transition from external control to internal control. Munroe uses this powerful image. In slavery, the law is written on the wall. Do not steal. Start work at 9 a.m.
And you obey it because you're afraid of the punishment.
Right. But in freedom, the law has to be written in your heart. You don't steal because you are fundamentally a person who respects property. You start work at 8 a.m. because you are driven by a vision, not by a time clock.
This goes back to that idea that you cannot have freedom without law.
It's impossible. That's just anarchy. And anarchy always leads back to dictatorship because human beings crave order. The core argument here is that a disciplined person is the only truly free person.
So if you remove external management, you have to replace it with self-discipline.
You must. It's not optional. If you don't, you will fail, and eventually a new manager, a new pharaoh, will have to step in to control you. You'll end up right back on a leash.
That's the self-imposed leash.
Yep.
Okay, so that's level 1. Level 2 is the stewardship shift. And this gets into the really fine distinction between being a manager and being an owner.
This is so critical for anyone who handles resources, whether that's budgets or teams or even just intellectual property. The core principle is this: stewardship is not ownership.
Hang on, didn't we just say that a free person needs to have an ownership mindset?
Yes, you need the responsibility of an owner, but you need the humility of a steward. It's a very nuanced distinction, but it's vital. In a corporate context, the company or the shareholders, or maybe the mission itself, is the true owner of the resources. You are the manager. You're the steward.
And what happens when a manager gets confused and starts thinking they are the owner?
That's when they start misappropriating resources. They treat the department budget like their own personal piggy bank. They start hiring their friends instead of the best talent. They use the company brand to build their own ego instead of the business.
And the source says, the moment a manager acts like an owner, they get fired.
Right. Because management is defined as the efficient use of another's resources with the intent to give an account. And that last phrase, with the intent to give an account, is everything. A steward always knows an audit is coming. An owner, in the negative sense, answers to no one. If you act like you answer to no one, you are a danger to the entire organization.
And the practical application here is really about building trust. If you can't properly manage a small amount, the wilderness resources, you will never be trusted with the Canaan resources.
Exactly. Management attracts resources. This is a basic law of economics and leadership. If you manage a $5,000 budget poorly, don't pray for the $50,000 budget. You'll just amplify your mismanagement by a factor of 10.
Okay, that makes sense. So, level 3, this is the deployment shift. And I really like this one because it completely reframes the whole concept of work itself. It's the difference between employment and deployment.
It's a brilliant play on words, but it's also a hard economic truth. A job is what you are paid to do. That's employment. You are filling a slot in someone else's machine.
You're a cog.
You're a cog. But work, in the definition of the source, is the release of your potential. That's deployment.
So the argument is that unemployment isn't the real tragedy.
No, not at all. Munroe argues the world's real problem isn't unemployment, it's underdeployment. Think of it in terms of factory assets. You have a machine on the factory floor that's plugged in and humming. It's employed. It's costing you electricity.
Okay.
But if that machine is capable of producing 1,000 units an hour, and it's only producing 100...
It's a massively wasted asset. It's underutilized.
Exactly. It's underdeployed. And we have millions of people who are employed. They have jobs. They punch the clock. But they are not deployed. Their unique skills, their latent potential, their gift is trapped inside them, unused.
They are doing the bare minimum to stay employed, rather than the maximum to be deployed.
And that is what true freedom is about. It's moving from being employed to being deployed. It means you stop asking, what does my job description say? And you start asking, what is my unique contribution to this domain? When you dominate a domain with your gift, you become indispensable. You effectively become the monopoly of your own talent.
Wow. This stuff it's heavy. It completely changes the way you look at something as simple as a promotion. It's not just a pay raise and a new title. It's a demand for a complete psychological overhaul.
It is. And honestly, most people are never coached through this. We just throw them into the deep end of the pool. We say, good luck, and then we're shocked when they drown.
So let's coach them. Let's get practical. We've extracted 6 scripts from the text. These are actual lines a leader can say, either to themselves in the mirror or to their team, to help trigger these shifts. I want to trade these back and forth. I'll give you the situation. You give me the line.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me.
All right, situation 1. You have a team member who is stalling. They're clearly waiting for you to tell them exactly what to do next. They're just kind of hovering.
You look at them and you say, you cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today.
That's good. It signals that waiting is not a neutral act. Waiting is an active choice to evade. Okay, situation 2. You're the leader, and you're trying to stop micromanaging. You're consciously stepping back, but you're worried the team won't step up.
You have to be very clear. You look them in the eye and you say, I can deliver you from supervision, but I cannot make you free. Only your discipline can do that.
Ooh. That puts the ball squarely back in their court. It separates your role, which is deliverance, from their role, which is freedom. Okay, situation 3. The team got the autonomy they asked for, but now they are complaining about the late nights and the stress.
That's tough love time, you say. Freedom demands more work than slavery. If you want the title, you carry the burden.
That's a serious reality check. Okay, situation 4. The classic budget dispute. Everyone wants more money, more headcount, before they've actually proven anything.
Simple. You say, management attracts resources. If you want more budget, show me better stewardship of what you already have.
That just shuts down the argument fast. Prove it first. Okay, situation 5. You're dealing with a visionary. The person who loves the big idea of freedom but hates the details and the actual execution.
You need to ground them, you say. Deliverance is an event. Freedom is a skill. We are done with the event. Now show me the skill.
Show me the skill. I like that. It changes the conversation from feelings to competency. Last one. Situation 6. You've got the victim mindset, the person who's blaming the market, the economy, the old boss, the algorithm.
You have to interrupt that pattern. You say, do not blame the system for your lack of fruit. Conditions determine conduct only until interrupted by an external force. You are that force.
You are that force. That is the ultimate empowerment script. It just stops the blame game cold.
And that's what this material is really about, isn't it? It's about stopping the blame game. As long as you're blaming Pharaoh or the system or your lack of resources, you are still a slave in your mind. You're waiting for a deliverer. A free person knows they have to be their own deliverer.
So let's apply this whole framework to a mini case study just to see how it plays out in the wild. Let's use the primary metaphor from the book, the wilderness versus Canaan. But let's translate it into a modern business scenario.
Okay, sounds good.
Let's say we have a team, a marketing division, maybe, that has just been spun out of a large bureaucratic corporation. They're now their own independent agency. They've been delivered from the mothership.
Okay, so they are in the wilderness. The wilderness is that dangerous, uncertain middle ground. They aren't under the protection and bureaucracy of the big corporation, which is Egypt, anymore.
Right.
But they haven't reached stability and profitability, which is Canaan, yet.
Exactly. And almost immediately, the chaos starts. What do we usually see happen in these situations?
You see the Bless Me Club form. They start complaining. We don't have the same IT support we used to have. HR isn't doing this for us anymore. Where are all the inbound leads that sales used to give us?
They are asking for the onions and garlic of Egypt.
Precisely. They want the comfort of the old routine, even though they claim to hate it. They want the resources of a massive corporation, but with the freedom of a startup. It doesn't work that way.
And what else happens?
They engage in magical thinking. They sit around waiting for manna, which in the startup world is usually VC funding or a magic bullet for easy inbound leads to just fall from the sky. And they refuse to fight the giants, which are the real market competitors.
So, as the leader of this new, struggling agency, how do you apply the framework? The source says you have to pivot from being Moses to being Joshua.
This is such a crucial distinction in the book. Moses was a deliverer. His job was to get them out, but Moses couldn't get them in. Joshua was a general. He was a freedom fighter.
And there's a specific moment the source points to. It's in the book of Joshua, chapter 5, verse 12. It says, quite simply, the manna stopped.
That is the pivot point for any leader. You have to look at the team and say, the manna stops today. We have to plant corn.
That has to be a terrifying moment for a team. What do you mean the manna stops? What do you mean corporate isn't sending us the leads anymore?
It means we have to go out and dig our own wells. We have to plant our own crops. The source says that Canaan isn't a place of rest. It's a place of responsibility. You eat what you kill.
And when the leader makes that decision, when they cut the manna, when they stop subsidizing incompetence or dependency, the team has a very binary choice.
That's right. They either starve like the dog at the stake, or they finally break their conditioning. They pick up their swords and their plows. They move from relying on wonders, which is luck or funding or someone else's help, to relying on work, which is generating their own revenue and production.
And that is where real stability comes from. It doesn't come from the next round of funding. It comes from the ability to plant corn yourself.
Stability is the direct result of responsibility. If you are depending on an external source for your survival, you are inherently unstable. You are just a well-fed slave.
This has been a massive deep dive. We've gone from the dog on the leash through the tin tub and neuroplasticity, codependency, the stewardship stack, and we've ended up in the cornfields of Canaan.
It really is a journey.
Let's wrap this up with an executive summary. If I'm a leader listening to this, or even just someone trying to level up my own career, what do I do tomorrow morning?
I think we can boil it all down to 3 actions and 1 metric.
Okay, go for it. Action 1.
Action 1. Audit your Egypt habits. Right now. Look at your life, your work, or your team. Where are you still standing up in the porcelain tub? Where are you using old scarcity-based habits in a new, abundant environment? You have to identify that mismatch. If you have the new software, use it fully. If you have the authority, actually use it.
Okay, action 2.
Action 2. Define the domain. Don't just ask for freedom or autonomy in the abstract. That's vague and dangerous. Define the specific domain you want to dominate. Be precise. Say, I want to own the entire customer onboarding process from first click to successful implementation.
And then?
Then you define the discipline required to hold that domain. If you can't define the discipline, you aren't ready for the domain, period.
That's how you prevent the retirement fallacy. And action 3.
Action 3. Stop the manna. As a leader, look at where you are subsidizing laziness or dependency in yourself or in your team. Where are you providing a safety net that is preventing the development of real strength? cut the safety net, force the transition from dependence to stewardship. It feels cruel in the moment, but it's actually the only way to create true strength.
And finally, the metric. How do we measure if this is working?
The source suggests a concept we can call your personal GNP, or gross national product. Munroe says a nation's true wealth is not its treasury. That's just the cash it has on hand. Its wealth is its productivity.
So don't measure your success by your salary or your team's budget.
Right, that's just the treasury. That's what you are given. You need to measure success by your output. What did you actually produce today? What value did you deploy into the world? That is your personal GNP. A high treasury with low productivity is just a bubble waiting to burst.
Productivity over treasury. That's the entire mindset shift right there.
It's the only metric that keeps you free.
We're going to leave you with one final thought from the source material. It's a line that I think perfectly sums up the tension of everything we've talked about today.
There is no greater burden than freedom, and no heavier load than liberty. Are you actually ready to carry it?
Something to think about. Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you next time.